Hi, everybody. We're at Masachet Eruvin, Daf Mem Vav 46. A lot of very interesting topics tonight. We're going to start off with about a rain, which continuing from yesterday, which we mentioned it, but now we'll get into it more. How come rain doesn't acquire the place where it starts off Shabbat, which in most cases would be in the ocean before it gets to rise up to the clouds, evaporate up to the clouds? So we'll see two answers to that. One, maybe it was already in the clouds, and two, that it's always moving. So something that's moving all the time can't acquire its place. Good. And then we'll see that the halacha follows Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri and the guy who's sleeping, that he acquires his place. But we have a second rule that's redundant, and that's going to bring us into the different rules about decision making. We'll see three different answers about why we need those redundant rules. And that'll launch us into a lengthy discussion about all different rules of Pisika. When we have different opinions, how do we know which one to do? And actually, that's a theme that runs throughout, because we're going to see that already here, the rule that Safek in the Rabbanan law is for leniency. All right, so let's jump right in. Amar Mor, in the Braita that we quoted yesterday, now we're going to re-quote part of it and analyze it further. B'yom tov harehen keragle kol adam. If rain falls on Yom Tov itself, then we consider it as if it has no place, and therefore anyone who picks up that water from a puddle or wherever it falls, then they acquire it, and so it acquires the techum of that person. This is a very important principle. Just like a person has a techum and he can't go outside 2,000 amot, so too all objects have a techum. It goes by the owner if he owns it. And in this case, because it fell on Yom Tov itself, so it never acquired any place before Shabbat. So it has no place. Therefore, the person that picks it up can take it anywhere wherever he could go. That was the Braita. Now we're going to ask, Ve'amai liknei shevita be'okyanos. Hold on. If it rained on Shabbat, that means it was in the cloud. That means before it was in the ocean and it evaporated. That means when Shabbat started, likely that it was in the ocean. So therefore, shouldn't it acquire a place where that droplet was in the ocean, which is probably far away, and therefore now it's far away from its techum, and you shouldn't be able to carry it at all. Okay, interesting question. So now we say, hold on, according to this, lema de la kirabi Eliezer, di kirabi Eliezer, ha'amar kol ha'olam kulo mime okeanus hu shoteh. Interestingly, in Masechet Ta'anit, there's a machloket about where rain comes from. Rabbi Eliezer says it comes from the ocean, and all water in the world comes from the ocean, evaporates, rains, and goes through the cycle. He knew about the rain cycle. Whereas the other opinion there says that rain comes from above the heavens. There are storehouses of water, and the heavens open up and they fall down. So that's the other opinion. So now, according to this, perhaps we should assume, we should learn from here that science or the halacha does not follow to be Eliezer, because if it did, then it should acquire the place in the ocean. And so since it doesn't acquire the place in the ocean, but rather after it falls, it has no place and anyone can pick it up, that means it must have been up there in the heavens from when Shabbat started, right? So should we conclude that? No, we don't want to conclude that. Interestingly, in the Talmud, if we have something that can solve a machloket, we don't like it. We want to keep the machloket alive. In this case, that's a good thing, because we want to follow the more scientific view here. And so Rabbi Yitzchak says, no, even when Shabbat started, let's assume that in this case, they were already in the rain droplets were already in the clouds. They already evaporated and formed the clouds. And that's why they acquired no place. And that's why the person who picks it up can acquire it, and it belongs to him and goes wherever he can go. Okay, so then that would solve that problem. But it raises a new problem. Wait, how do you know it's the same cloud? Maybe that cloud that you saw on Friday afternoon when Shabbat started, maybe that went away, and this is a new cloud that formed on Shabbat. There's no way for you to know. And then we answer, there is. Right? There maybe there's a certain sign. Maybe the cloud looked like an elephant. I could tell it's the same cloud as before. I've been tracking it. So I know it's the same cloud, and it was there up there before Shabbat. Or or we could say it's we're in doubt. But a case of uncertainty, maybe it was in the ocean when Shabbat started, but maybe it was already evaporated in the cloud when Shabbat started. If it was in the ocean, it'll acquire a place in the ocean, then I cannot move it. But if it was already in the cloud, then it was then it fell for me, and it had no place. So therefore, I can use it. Since all the laws of Techum Shabbat are midrabanan, that's the majority opinion. There are some opinions I think it's Doraita, but here, assuming it's Rabbanan, therefore, there's a general rule that whenever you have an uncertainty in a rabbinic law, you can always be lenient. And so now we can be lenient and assume that it was not in the ocean when Shabbat started. All right, good. So that could solve the problem, but it raises a new problem. Hold on, it was in the cloud, right? So let it acquire a residence in the cloud. That's its place, and it can't move 2,000 and what from out wherever that cloud is. And if the cloud is moving on Shabbat, then it might be out. Tifshot minad en techumin lamalam asara. Yesh techumin liknei shevita be'avim. If so, if this is true, then we could solve that problem we had before. We questioned, does Techum Shabbat apply when you're traveling above 10 tefachim off of the ground? And so according to this, we would have to say that there is no Techum above 10 tefachim, and that's why when it's in the cloud, it doesn't acquire any place because Techum Shabbat does not apply high up. And then when it falls, only when it falls, before Shabbat, it was in no place. When it falls, anyone can come pick it up. Oh, so you see here, now we can resolve that problem, but that's a question because we don't want to resolve that problem because when we discussed that, we never brought this as a proof and it was unresolved. So therefore, we want to be able to interpret this law according to either opinion. So the olam emalach yesh techumin. Actually, we can interpret this according to the other opinion that Techum does apply above high up. And we can answer that the water, when it's in the clouds, is not in the same form. It's just a misty form. It's not droplets of water. And so actually, the water that I have in front of me in the puddle did not exist at all when Shabbat started. It's a new formation. Beforehand, it was only mist. And that's why it didn't acquire a place beforehand. All right, that solves that problem, but brings up an even bigger problem. In that case, and something is called nolad. Nolad is a strict form of mukseh, something that didn't exist before Shabbat started and comes into existence. Obviously, you didn't have in mind that you were going to use it, so it was prohibited. And so now you have a new thing, this drop of rain, and so then it'll be prohibited to even move at all. Forget Techum Shabbat. So how could you even do anything with it? So that's not good. Ela maya be'avim minad naideh. So final answer is that the water in the clouds move, and therefore, when Shabbat starts, it's like looking for a place. You got to stand still in order to acquire a place, just for a few minutes there. And since it's always moving, it never acquires a spot. And so then, when it falls on Shabbat, then it has no place, never acquired a place, and that's why I can take it with me wherever I want. So that solves that problem. Oh, but now we have something very good. Once we resolve the problem about the clouds, since it moves, now actually we don't even need to get to the whole assumption about clouds. Now, even if I know for sure that it was in the ocean when Shabbat started, and it only evaporated, went to the cloud and rained after Shabbat started, all the water in the ocean is always moving around. They probably mean the Mediterranean Sea here. And we actually have a braita that says flowing rivers and streaming springs follow the feet of the people, meaning of whoever picks it up, he acquires it, and that person can move it anywhere they want. And so with that, we resolved the problem. Okay, so to review, we were asking, why doesn't rain acquire a place in the ocean, right? How come you said in the Braita that I'm allowed to pick it up after it rains on Shabbat? So one answer is that it was already in the clouds. And it was in the clouds, and we recognize that was the same cloud that was there when Shabbat started, or that I'm not sure, but Safek rabbinic law is lenient, or we say it's always moving, and that's why. And it could be in the cloud, or it could even be in the ocean. And since it's always moving, it doesn't acquire a place. All right, since we mentioned Safek and rabbinic law is lenient, that's important because this is going to be the beginning of speaking about rules that we use for Pesach Halacha. Okay, so next section is the fact that the Halacha follows Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Remember that case where a person is sleeping on Shabbat on Friday afternoon, and all of a sudden he wakes up and Shabbat, it's dark, Shabbat already started. And so he did not have intention to make wherever he's sleeping his place. He's out in the middle of the wilderness, right? So the other opinion says, well, he never acquired a place. He's stuck there. He can't move beyond 4 amot. But Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says, no, sleeping person, it's his intention is implied. And just by being there, he acquires 2,000 amot around him. So he's lenient. Okay, this is okay, good. So now we're going to have another law, a rule that says we're always lenient in Eruvin. And if we're always lenient in Eruvin, when there's a machloket, then why didn't you tell me Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri is the halachas like him? So we'll see 3 answers to this. One, that we're lenient even for a minority against a majority, and Rabbi Yochanan is a minority. 2 is that we're lenient in Eruv of boundaries, not only of Eruv Chatzerot. And 3, that even an initial, when you're starting to make an Eruv, you might have thought that there's that we have to be more machmir there, and this is going to teach that we don't have to. Okay, so that's the outline of what's to come. And now let's see it inside. Amar Rabbi Yaakov, Bar Idi, Amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, Halacha, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Right? In fact, if someone is sleeping, when Shabbat starts, he acquires that spot and he can walk 2,000 amot all around. Good. Amar Rabbi Zera, Rabbi Yaakov Bar Idi, Beferush Sheme'alach, or Mikilala Sheme'alach. This question is found many times throughout Shas. The question is, did you hear that explicitly? In other words, did you, Rabbi Yaakov, did you hear Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi say that explicitly? Halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri? Or did you infer it from something else that he said? So he says, Beferush Sheme'ali. Often it makes a difference, right? If they only said something else and you're just inferring it, then I can question your inference, right? How exactly did you infer it? But he says, no, I heard it directly, those exact words, Halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan. Okay, good. Now the Gemara asks, what general rule could we have learned this from? Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, the same sage, said a more general rule that halacha kedivra mekel ba'eruv. We always follow the lenient opinion when it comes to eruv. Eruv in general is a Rabbanan law, so therefore we can be lenient. So now we ask, why do I need the redundancy? I could have said, well, only one or the other, and I would have known that the halakha is that a sleeping person acquires his place. So we're going to have both ways. Show why we need both. Amar bizera serichi diyeshminan halakha Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri havamina ben nekula ben nechumra kamashmalan halakha kedibra mekel be'aruv. If I only had Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, I would think that we follow his opinion both for leniency and stringency. The case of leniency is the sleeping person. The case of stringency is, remember, an ownerless item, a bottle out in the middle of the desert. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says that it acquires its spot, which means, therefore, that it can only be carried 2,000 amot from where it begins, and that could be a stringency, because if you say that it does not acquire its spot, then anyone who picks it up can take it wherever he wants. Maybe the person who picked it up came from further west and wants to be able to take it further west. And so in that case, his opinion would be a stringency. I'd rather an ownerless item just had no status, so that whoever picks it up can take it wherever he wants. And so that's why we have to teach us that we always follow lekula, even against Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri in this case. Right, so the logic would be that a lifeless item, just an object, has no mind at all and can acquire a place. Whereas a sleeping person, even though right now he's not aware of anything, he has potential to be aware, and therefore, just even having that potential, he's able to acquire the place where he's sleeping. Okay, so now we know why we need the general rule, but now let's ask the other way around. Lema halacha k'divrei mekel ba'eruv. Halacha k'Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, lamali. Just tell me the general rule. I always follow leniency. And then I don't need the specific rule because I would know that we're going to follow him and regarding a sleeping person. So here's the first of three answers. Istirich sakad atech amina. Hanemele yachid b'makom yachid, v'rabim b'makom rabim, ava yachid b'makom rabim emala. If you told me only the general rule, then I would apply it. I would think to apply it only when it's a single versus a single opinion, or many authorities versus many authorities. I follow the leniency. But if it's one who's lenient versus many who are stringent, then I would say, no, maybe I won't follow that rule. I should follow the many. I mean, what's the order of operations? You follow majority first, and then you follow the one that's lenient, right? Or not. So therefore, I wouldn't know. That's why I have to tell me that Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, even though he's only a single authority against the majority who's stringent, even so, we follow him. We follow the minority opinion. All right, so that's really important to be able to know that. Let's dwell on this rule itself for a little bit. Amar leRavan Abaye, michdi Eruvin derabanan, mal yachid b'mkom yachid, mal yachid b'mkom rabim. Hold on, he says, if you're talking about the Rabbanan, then in general, in all the Rabbanan, we follow leniency. And it shouldn't matter whether it's one against one or one against many. In any Rabbanan, he's assuming, we should always be lenient. And so we don't need to know that particularly in this rule. We would know that in general because it's the Rabbanan. That's Rabba's assumption, but Abaye is going to undermine the very assumption. He's going to say, no, even in the Rabbanan, if it's a majority that's stringent, we follow the majority first. And only otherwise we go by the lenient rule. And he's going to prove this from two cases. He says, Rava, do you really think that in rabbinic laws, we don't make a difference between one against one and one against many? And we always follow the lenient rule? It's not true. We follow the many. And here's the proof. Habatanan, Rabbi Elazar Omer, Kol Isha she'avru aleh shalosh onot, daya sha'ata. Okay, this Mishnah from Masechet Nida requires a little bit of explanation. The law is that, let's say you have a young woman who has a regular period. So let's say she's tahor right now, and so she's involving and she's doing touching something that's tahor. Let's say some tirumah. She's preparing some tirumah. It has to be tahor. She did that in the morning. In the afternoon, she saw some blood. So now she knows that she's tameh from the afternoon on. The question is, when did she become tameh before? So can we assume that she was tahor the whole time until she actually saw it? So the halacha is, according to Bet Hillel and Chachamim, that no, she has to assume that she was tameh already from either 24 hours before or the last time that she checked. Let's say she checked when she woke up in the morning and she was tahor then. So from then and before that, she's tahor. But she doesn't know. Maybe she started bleeding just a few minutes later in the morning, and therefore all the food that she touched is going to be. We have to assume retroactively is tameh. Okay, that's a regular case of a young woman who has a regular period. Someone who is not menstruating, so postmenopausal. In that case, if a woman sees blood, since she's not expected to see blood ever, she doesn't have to do that. She can assume only from the time she saw and on she's tameh. Before that, she is tahor the whole time, right? Because there's no reason for her to expect that she would see any blood. Those cases everyone agrees about. Here's the disagreement. Let's say you have a young woman who didn't see blood 1, 2, 3 months in a row. In that case, can we assume that maybe her period stopped, and therefore she is like an older woman who doesn't have to expect it, and therefore no retroactive tumah for her? That's the majority opinion. Or do we say, since she's a young woman still, and even if she misses 3, doesn't matter. She still has to go retroactively. I'm sorry. That's the majority opinion. Majority opinion is stringent, that she has to. Even a young woman who doesn't see it period 3 times has to retroactively assume that she is tameh from the last time she checked. But Rabbi Elazar says, Kol isha, any woman, if she saw 3 months, and she didn't see blood, daya sha'ata, her tumah just goes from then and following, no, not retroactive. Okay, that's the halacha. And now we have a story. Betanya Maaseh ve'asa Rabbi Elazar. A case like this came before Rabbi Yehuda Nasi. A woman, young woman, and she didn't see for 3 months, and then she saw, and before that she touched some food, and so Rabbi said, "Oh, you can follow Rabbi Elazar, right? You can follow his opinion, and you're okay from now, from here on. The food that you touched, you're not good from here on. The food you touched earlier is fine." Okay, good. She left. After that, the Rabbi said, "Hold on." He remembered that he should not have given a psak halacha like Rabbi Elazar, and he said, "Oh well, it was exigent circumstances. So okay, I followed him, but really I shouldn't have followed him." So now let's analyze. That's the story. What do you mean? What do you mean after he remembered? Remembered what? If you remember that we don't follow Rabbi Elazar at all, and halachas like Rabbanan who are stringent, then if that's the halacha, then you can't follow the minority opinion, even if it's a difficult circumstance. You just can't do it at all. So then he should have went back and tracked it down and said, "Oh, I made a mistake." So rather, rather it must be a case where the halacha was never decided explicitly. It never came up to the Supreme Court. The rabbis never got together and made a vote on it. And so we just have these two opinions, and we don't know which one to do. So it's a sefek. And so at first he thought that it's just two opinions, equal opinions, yachid b'yachid. And then he remembered, no, it's a majority against the minority. So in that case, he said, "Oh, I followed the minority. Oh, well, so, it was a difficult circumstance, so it's okay." But in general, he would not have done that. In general, he would follow the majority that are stringent and not the minority that's lenient. This is all rabbinic law. Tumah itself is deoraita, but the retroactive tumah, that law is the Rabbanan. And so therefore we see that, long proof that even in rabbinic laws, we follow the majority against the minority, even when the majority is stringent. Okay, and so therefore this is now all good because that's the opinion that we needed, right? Rava was assuming the opposite, so now we can reject Rava, and we now know that the general rule is the law follows the majority that's stringent, and that's why in this case we needed to tell you halacha is like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, because otherwise I would have thought we should follow the majority rule that's stringent in the case of a sleeping person, and so that's why I need to tell you the specific rule. We follow the minority here who is lenient. Okay, good. So that's one. Now we're going to do all that again with a different case. Amar Rav Meshashia l'Rava, v'amri la Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak l'Rava. So now they're also countering Rava, who challenged this general rule. Ubedrabanan la shani ben yachid b'mkom yachid ben yachid b'mkom rabim. Rava, do you really think that in rabbinic laws there's no difference between one against one and one against many, and we always follow the lenient opinion no matter what? And according to that, you had a problem with what came before. Tanya, no, I can prove that it's not so. We follow the majority for stringency. In this case, Shemua kiroba noheget shiv'a ushloshim rechoka ena noheget ela yom echad. In the case of someone who has a relative who died and he has to be in mourning, if he heard right away, right, and soon after he died, then he follows 7 days of mourning, and right, it's for Shiva, and the 30 days of mourning period in which he can't take haircuts and so on. However, if he heard a long time after, right, and sometimes this happens, there's no good communication. Sometimes today we do it on purpose if someone is elderly or whatever. And so if the person doesn't hear about it right away, then he only is in mourning for 1 day. Okay, that's what the Braita says. Now, what does it mean? Ezohi kiroba ve'ezohi rechoka, betoch sheloshim. Oh, this continuation of Braita. Betoch sheloshim kiroba, lachar sheloshim rechoka. The cutoff is 30 days. If he hears that someone, his relative died within 30 days, then he has to sit and he has to mourn 7 and 30. But after that, no. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. Chachamim omerim, achat shemua kiroba, v'achat shemua rechoka, noheget shiv'a u'shloshim. So all this was Rabbi Akiva, but the Chachamim are stringent here, and they say whether he heard right away or whether he heard after a long time, it doesn't matter. As soon as he hears, he starts mourning 7 and 30. Okay, so here we have a good case of a minority who is lenient and the majority who's stringent. Amar Baba bar Chana, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Makom shata mosei yachid. Mekel, v'rabim machmirim, halacha k'divrei machmirim hamerubim. So we have a rule here in the name of Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan makes a lot of these rules, as we'll see. He says, anytime you see a single person who is lenient against the majority who is stringent, like in this case, we follow the majority that's stringent. Chutz mizah, except for this case. In this case, even though Rabbi Akiva is lenient, still we follow him against the majority who is stringent. Okay, good. So, Besabar la keshmuel, damar Shmuel, halacha k'divrei hamekel be'evel. And so this agrees with what Shmuel says. Then the laws of Avelut in general were always lenient. That's true halacha l'maaseh today. The laws of Avelut, most of them are midrabanan, and therefore we are lenient in the laws of Avelut. Okay, now we're going to clinch our proof. Avelut hu da'kilu barabanan, aval ba'alma, afilu b'drabanan shani, ben yachid b'mekom yachid, ben yachid b'mekom rabim. So we see from all this that only in the laws of mourning, we have to go out of our way to say, in the laws of mourning, we are lenient, even to follow a minority opinion. But if you had to say that, that means in all other laws, all other rabbinic laws, then there is a difference between one and one and one and many. We would follow the majority, even if the majority was stringent. And so you see that the general rule is that we in fact do follow the majority to be stringent. And so if I go back to our outline, we can see where we are. Yeah. Okay. So right, our original question was we have a general rule, and then we have also Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Halacha follows him, and the question is, why do we need to say that halacha follows him if we always know that the halacha follows a lenient opinion? And our answer is that we need to know because actually, in general, we follow the majority, even if the majority is stringent. And so we had to say here we follow the minority. And we see that in general we follow the majority, like in the blood case and where the mourner case, that that's an exception. And so this is all one answer to the question of redundancy. But now we're going to see two more answers to that original question. Okay, so all this set aside. Okay, V'Rav Papa Amar, his second answer, Isterich, we need the statement, both statements of Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi. I might have thought, when do we say that we're lenient in these laws, in the laws of Eruv? Only in Eruv Chatzerot. But maybe I would think in Eruv Tichumin, boundary laws, then I have to be more stringent. And so that's why I have to tell you, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, we follow him also because this is a case of boundary tichum for boundaries. And so that's why I need to know it. All right, now, why would we think that there is a difference between one type of eruv and another type of eruv? Ben eruvei chatzerot ve'eruvei tichumin. Ditnan, here's a Mishnah later in Masechet Eruvin. It says, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, b'mei devarim amurim. The question was, can I make a tichum for someone else without their knowledge, right? They don't even know I'm making a tichum for them. I just want to do them a favor. So does it make a difference in these two different areas of law? So yes, b'mei devarim amurim be'eruv tichumin. אבל בערוב חצרות מערבין בין לדעת בין שלא לדעת, שזכין לאדם שלא בפניו, ואין חבין לאדם אלא בפניו. Okay, so let's go through each case. In Eruv Chatzerot, right? I want to join my courtyard together with my neighbor so that we can carry in the courtyard. So let's say my neighbor, he's doesn't know what's going on. He's busy. I can't get him or whatever. So I can make an Eruv on his behalf. What I'll do is I'll take some food. I'll make sure it's all enclosed, and I'll take some food for him, and I'll give it to someone. I say, I'm giving you this on behalf of myself and my friend, and I deposit it in my courtyard. And that way, the Eruv works for me and for him. I could tell him later on Shabbat, oh, by the way, I'm in Eruv. He'll say, oh, thank you so much. Now I get to carry. That's allowed because we can always benefit a person even in his absence. For example, if I'm walking and I see a watch in the street and it doesn't belong to anybody, and I can pick it up and I say, I'm picking this up for Mark, right? And by doing that, it becomes Mark's possession, even though I didn't ask him, because we assume that's a benefit. So too, Eruv Chatzerot is always a benefit. You can't lose out by having an Eruv Chatzerot. However, Eruv Tichumin is not a benefit. If I say I'm going to take this meal and I'm going to put it out in the desert for my friend David, and so then I told him I made an Eruv for you. It's all the way in the east. He says I don't want to go east. I want it to be west, right? And so that is a demerit for him. He doesn't want that. Therefore, I cannot do that for him without his knowledge. Okay, this, by the way, is an extremely important halacha for making modern Eruvin. Because without this, we'd have to go to each and every person in a town, in a neighborhood, and ask him, "Are you willing? Do you want to make that Eruv? Do you want to make that Eruv?" And a lot of people would say no, that they don't want to make that Eruv because they know there's a lot of opposition to it for different reasons. And so, therefore, we rely on this halakha to say, we're going to make an Eruv for everyone. We're not going to ask them their opinion. And even if they have signs outside saying, "No Eruv, we don't want the Eruv," and they're pulling it down, it doesn't matter. We assume that it's a benefit for the people that if they carry, they don't have to carry, but if they do carry, then they won't violate any laws. And so therefore, we use this to make communal Eruvin. Okay, so this is the answer. The Papa is saying, I needed to say this because if I had only the general rule that we're lenient in Eruvin, I would think maybe that only applies to Eruv Chatzerot, where things are generally more lenient, but maybe not Eruv Tichumin, where you see things are more stringent. Therefore, I need the other rule, halacha falz b'yochel menuri, regarding Eruv Tichumin. And now I know it. Now, and that's why I need to know it. Okay, last answer. I might have thought that the rule that you can be lenient in Eruvin is only once the Eruv is already made and it's in place, then I'm just maintaining it. You need less effort to maintain something than to start it off to begin with. And so therefore, I need the Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri's rule to say, even if I'm starting off at a techum, an Eruv Techumin, even so I can follow the lenient opinion. Now, why would I think it should be any different? Why should the initial force be greater than keeping up the momentum force? We learned this from Mishnah that talks about the amount of food that I need to make an eruv. The amount of food, we discussed how much food you need, right? 2 meals. He says, well, that's only needed when you first make up the eruv. But let's say after you make the eruv and you want to use it again for the week after, and someone ate some of it, or some of it got gone, and now you have less than the amount. That's okay. You can continue using the eruv as long as you had the proper amount in the beginning. And therefore you see that in general more lenient as we go along. So I might have thought we're only lenient as you go along, but to begin you have to be more stringent, and that's why I need the second rule here. Even though I'm making an eruv, it's still good. And why? Why would it make a difference? It's a very interesting line, not really fully clear what it means. It's saying that the whole eruv is only made. We don't really need it at all. We only make it so that the students will not forget what the whole law of eruv. I think it means something like technically we already made a partnership in our courtyards, right? And so we already have a partnership. So why do we need to keep the food around at all? And so maybe it's that if we don't do that, then, many years can go by and people will forget that we're only allowed to carry her because one time you did make that partnership. And so we need to keep something around, but it doesn't have to be the full meal, even something that would just be a reminder, that would be sufficient. All right, and with that, we finish the section B, and we understand why we need these two rules. And now that we've talked so much about rules, we're going to have a long section that we'll go into tomorrow of rules of decision making. And you can see how important these rules are going to be. Rabbi Yaakov ורבי זריקה אמרו, הלכה כרבי עקיבא מחברו, וכרבי יוסי מחבריו, וכרבי מחברו. Here's a general rule. Whenever you're reading a Mishnah or Baraita and you see many different opinions, so if you have Rabbi Akiva against a colleague, then halakha is like Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva's opinion trumps any of his colleagues. Notice it says mechavero in singular. Whereas for the next one, halakha follows Rabbi Yoseh mechaverav among his friends. That means that when Rabbi Yoseh is even against 2 or 3 or many of his colleagues, still we follow Rabbi Yoseh. And we follow Rabbi mechavero against singular, but not against the majority. Okay, by the way, this is going in each generation. Rabbi Akiva is a 3rd generation Tana, Rabbi Yosef is a 4th generation Tana, and Rabbi is a 5th generation Tana. So now we know the rule in every single generation. So this is very good. I analyzed this a little bit in my dissertation, and noticed that the manuscripts have some differences. So here's the Munich manuscript, says Halacha Rabbi Akiva mechavero. That's the same. But lo mechaverav, and not only singular, but not friends. It makes it more explicit. Halacha Rabbi Yoseh afilu mechaverav, which is what we have. And then halacha Rabbi mechaverav. So this one says Rabbi trumps even the plural, his many friends. That's different from our printed edition. The manuscript in the Vatican says also something even more different. It says halacha Rabbi Akiva mechaverav. So Rabbi Akiva trumps even many. Rabbi Yoseh mechavero, Rabbi Yoseh only one, and Rabbi mechavero, Rabbi only one. This is like the opposite of the Munich manuscript. So you see that one yud changes it from a singular to plural and actually makes a very big difference. But you can see that little yud is very difficult to preserve by copyists. And maybe that's why the Munich manuscript, added in and chavero and not chaverav. Okay, so it's going to be difficult to establish the exact original statement here, but at least we know for sure when it's one-on-one. Okay, and now, so that's Rabbi Yaakov's rule. We ask about that rule. Why? How do we apply his rule? Rabbi Aseh Amad halacha. We apply absolutely. Whenever you have Rabbi Akiva and his colleague, halacha is like Rabbi Akiva. No questions asked. No, it just means that we incline towards Rabbi Akiva. It's not an absolute rule. If you have other reasons to go against Rabbi Akiva, then you can go. But you should try to veer towards Rabbi Akiva. He's preferable. Right? Kind of tip the scale in his favor. Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Chanina, Amad Nid'in. No, these rules are even less than that. It's just that it appears that one should rule this way. Give some slight preference to Rabbi Akiva, to Rabbi Yosef, and to Rabbi. But really, if you have any other reason to say otherwise, then you don't have to. It's not an ironclad rule. It's just kind of a rule of thumb. Okay, good. So they're kind of downplaying the importance of the rules. All right, now we have another rule. Kilashon hazeh. This is now all in the same generation. Kilashon hazeh amar Rabbi Yaakov bar Idi amar Rabbi Yochanan. So he said the name of Rabbi Yochanan. That's important. And in fact, all these rules seem to derive from Rabbi Yochanan and his school and his students. You find them also in the Talmud Yerushalmi. So Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, these are all now students of Rabbi Akiva, 4th generation. So if you have Rabbi Machlok between Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, halacha is like Rabbi Yehuda. Okay, so Rabbi Yehuda is above. Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Yosef, halacha like Rabbi Yosef. So you have Yosef is above Yehuda, and Rabbi Yehuda is above Rabbi Meir. Therefore, right? If A is greater than B and B is greater than C, then certainly A is greater than C. So the Biyoseh certainly will follow halacha compared to the Bimeir. Right? You don't have to say that. If his opinion, if Bimeir does not, we don't follow him in front of the Yehuda, then all the more so we would not follow him before the Biyoseh. Okay, good. So that's the general rule. Amar Rabbi Rav Asi, Af ani lomed Rabbi Yosef v'Rabbi Shimon. But he says, I have a similar rule, but not with Rabbi Meir, but rather instead with Rabbi Shimon. Halacha could be Af ani lomed Rabbi Yosef v'Rabbi Shimon. Halacha could be Yosef. Again, Rabbi Yosef is always on top. Amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi v'Rabbi Shimon. Halacha could be Yehuda. So we have Rabbi Yehuda is over Rabbi Shimon. If you're not going to follow him in front of Rabbi Yehuda, then Rabbi Shimon in front of Yehuda, then certainly you're not going to follow him when he's in machloket with Rabbi Yosef. So again, Rabbi Yosef is on top. Okay, now, so we have two versions. This one was talking about Rabbi Meir, is on the lowest level, and this one said Rabbi Shimon's on the lowest level. Now, what if they're against each other? Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Shimon, Mai. What if those two are against each other? I don't know. We don't have a rule about that. So we're going to leave that one standing, and we're going to leave the stuff standing here. Tomorrow we'll see Rav Mesharshia's rule that he rejects all of these rules. Right, this is a meta-anti rule, and we're going to prove why he doesn't follow any of these rules. What's at stake here really is there a systematic rule framework? And anytime we see Mishnah, we follow these rules and we know what the halacha is. That's what Rabbi Yochanan said. Or do we do it by a case-by-case basis? For each Mishnah, we'll look at it and we'll evaluate, and there's no absolute rule that we always follow this one, always follow that one. And that's what Rav Mesharshiah says, and in general, this is the difference between a Talmud Yerushalmi that has exact rules and always follows them and has one outcome, and the Talmud Bavli, which allows a lot more leeway to judge on a case-by-case basis, and therefore you could come up with many different solutions to the same problem, a lot more tolerant of pluralism of different halachic outcomes. Baruch Adonai Olam, Amen ve'Amen.